Oh, um, oh, shit. We all have stories to tell, and sometimes those stories need to be shared with the world. Good evening. I'm Leighanna Yaps, here with another video you're legally required to watch, or at least listen to. I know some of you have ADHD. Today we're going to be talking about the lore of Dropout's very important people. Let's get on with the video.
This is better, isn't it? First things first, before I dive into the lore, this is your official spoiler warning for Season 1 of Dropout TV's Very Important People. I will be talking about the lore of just Season 1 because A, Season 1 was all that was out when I started my notes for this video, and 2, Season 2 isn't all the way out, and I'm about to move out of my college dorm room, which is exactly what happened with my first Gamechanger video. That was a year ago. I do think Very Important People is a show where you can entirely be spoiled on the plot of it and still watch it because there is no plot. Which brings me to our background information. If you don't know what Very Important People is, the premise of the show is that it takes a comedian and blindly costumes and makeups them, and then they have to make up a character on the spot to get interviewed by our host, Vic Michaelis. Now, you may think there's no lore because of that. There is. There is a lot more lore in Season 2, which I have tried to stay away from so that this is solely what you get when you watch Season 1 for the first time. But I have watched a lot of interviews that the cast has done, or like the creative team has done, and Season 2, they did decide to lean more into the lore. The lore here doesn't exist as much, but evidently there's a lot based on what's behind me. Now, Vic Michaelis, our lovely host, is the center of the Very Important People universe in our eyes, because this is how we're introduced to each character is through Vic. So naturally, they have the most complicated part in this web that is behind me. It is important to note that while Vic Michaelis in Very Important People and Vic Michaelis the comedian in the real world have the same name, it is Vic Michaelis the comedian playing Vic Michaelis in VIP. So just because something is true about the real life Vic doesn't mean it's true about this Vic, and vice versa. However, I'm kind of taking real life Vic and Vic Michaelis as Vic Michaelis in Very Important People as kind of similar to the lore as the FNAF books to FNAF, the video games. Essentially, that just means, for example, if I'm trying to figure out how old host of VIP Vic is, I will use real life Vic's age as a suggestion. Does that make sense? It doesn't matter. So let's get into our first episode. Look at the clipboard. We're going to start actually with episode 3, Vic's ex-step grandmother, because this episode is so much more foundational to the web than the actual episode 1, because they tried to ease us into the lore. Vic's ex-step grandmother, also known as Nana, she is a criminal. She left Vic home alone for 4 days, presumably when Vic was a minor, which illegal. The reason that Nana and Vic's grandfather divorced is because Nana was stealing her husband's, Vic's grandfather's, Bitcoin. Now, I Googled, whenever I say I Googled, I did a quick peruse, okay? This is not factually accurate. Don't take any of this information anywhere else, okay? You didn't hear it from me. I Googled it, and it said that Bitcoin. It said that Bitcoin launched in 2009. I want to say, though, that the stealing of it happened 2020, 2021, because if you think about it, these old people had to figure out what Bitcoin was, and then it had to be big enough of a deal for Nana to then steal it. And also, like, to divorce over it, it had to be worth a lot. We also find out that Nana has killed a dog, shot a gun, and never lost a tooth. The dog is not named. We don't know what dog she killed. However, we do know she has a dog named Snooki, no relation to Jersey Shore. And I'm not entirely sure that it is or isn't Snooki that she killed. I think it makes sense, especially when we find out that she later lives in the sewers. We'll get there. She also was in the war. Now, what war, you may be asking? Great question. They don't specify. I Googled it. Theoretically, it could be World War I, World War II, or Vietnam. Because I feel like those are the big wars. So I feel like it has to be one of those 3. I think it probably was World War II based on the other information we have, which again, I'll get there. But my question is, does this really matter for our purposes? Here's the thing. There is lore between the characters, but as for timing of things, it's kind of just a suggestion, because especially because it's improv, these actors forget. And also, like, they can't, like, Google when were the wars. Like, they just think it's funny to say they were in the war. But I do think it was either World War II or Nam. I think World War I we can probably rule out. I think it makes more sense for it to be World War II. Anna also says that Vic is a reporter now. So this is relatively new, or as far as Nana is concerned, because again, she has lived in the sewers for a while after the split, eating pizza in the sewer like a Ninja Turtle. She's only ever had the sewer kind of pizza, which honestly is a little bit sad. I think it's honestly probably just like a year or two, maybe 3. I feel like any time spent in the sewers is going to get extrapolated when talking about it, because I mean, if you're living in the sewers, maybe she's going up for groceries, but it doesn't seem like that's the case, especially if she's only ever had sewer pizza. So I think she was probably living in the sewers for a couple years, just not seeing the light of day and not knowing what day it was. So it could be as long or as short as we feel. We do find out that Vic is married to a man. That is pretty much all we know about him, except for the fact that he has a stepdaughter. Now, what's important to note about this is that Nana was at the wedding. So we have to assume, at the very least, depending on how long Grandma was in the sewers, they've been married longer. Because again, Nana was there, nobody had contact with her, because she didn't even know that Vic's grandpa died and left her his entire fortune. We pretty much know next to nothing about Vic's husband, because Vic doesn't like them. Do know, though, that he has a stepdaughter and she is watching. We later find out that her name is Bianca and that she is a PA. But she is Vic's stepdaughter, and Vic kind of wants to impress her, but also they kind of hate each other. There's more about that in season 2. Vic says that they called Nana for 23 years. I don't think this means that Vic is 23 because, again, I think this takes into account the sewer years. However, we do know that Nana was married to Vic's grandpa before Vic was born, because Vic's birth is what caused problems in that relationship. I did Google how old actual Vic is in real life, and I got the answer 34. This was filmed like 2 years ago, so 32, and I think that really checks out. I do think that means that Nana spent a bit more time in the sewers than like a year. That could also be taking into account the split. I don't know. Again, timeline, weird. We find out that Vic's worst nightmare is being left alone. So Vic's original grandparents were together for 40 years until their grandma died in a horse accident that Nana definitely had something to do with. But Nana does say that after Vic's grandmother died, they did wait a while before getting married again. Nana's first love is Vic's grandpa, which is sweet. And that Nana was the only grandma that Vic really grew up with because their other grandma was constantly on cruises. Again, this pulls into question Nana's age, because maybe she's just a lot younger than Vic's grandpa, but at the very least 20 when they got married, and then if they were together for at least 23 years, like, grandpa is super old at this point, because by the divorce, at the very least he's been married for 63 years to somebody, and like if they waited a while, that's like 60, like he's old. He died from old age. We find out that Nana owned one of the only women-owned business, beautiful hair for voluptuous women. Now, I googled this, and the first actual women-owned business was in 1739. It also was a thing that mainly black women started their own business because of outside factors, and like nobody would hire them. And it is fair to say that Nana is not that. However, I kind of put it around the 1920s that this is happening, because like maybe she's the first in her town to have like a storefront. You know what I mean? And it is a hair salon, so I feel like there's some give and take here. I don't know. I'm not a history expert. I'm majoring in theater and communications. So we do find out that there is a metal detector on the way in from the studio, that this show does take place in Los Angeles, just like it does in real life. Unlike real life, though, it is said quite a few times that this show is live television, which is interesting because most interviews are not. But I do think it gives a very interesting vibe to know that everything that's happening is live. I do think this is a relatively low budget show, but I think it's in a higher budget or like a medium budget company. Kind of similar to Dropout in a way, because Vic does say that a lot of the crew was found on Craigslist. This could also be in part to Vic hating the crew. Hashtag Grant O'Brien coded. On the same aspect, Vic keeps telling everybody that they are better than this show, which does seem to imply that Vic has reason to believe that. Like maybe something in their background or just delusion. And honestly, knowing a lot about the character of Vic, I think it's mostly delusion. I don't think Vic really has a lot going on outside of this show. Apparently, Vic worked at the New York Cheesecake Factory, reportedly made of cheese manchego. I'm unsure how valid that statement is, considering it came from Nana, who is a little psychotic. But maybe Vic did work at the New York Cheesecake Factory that is reportedly made out of cheese manchego. Nana won't die. That's kind of the thing that makes me believe that she is ancient, because Vic says that she won't die. Everybody kind of wants her to, but she's still kicking. Amen for that, brother. Nana wrote a book. I don't know how popular it is, considering it seems to be mostly just smut. But hey, some of the book talk girlies love that. That's not hate. Love what you love. Love who you love. Be who you are for your pride. Vic has glasses now. Vic didn't used to have glasses. Vic has glasses now. It could be that Vic didn't have glasses because it seems like a lot of the parental figures and the people that would notice that they would need glasses were not great. Anna doesn't believe in free will, which I think is interesting. I don't know quite how to connect that to anything on here. This show always asks each guest what the meaning of life is, and Nana said family. Now let's jump into episode 1, Princess Emily. This is my favorite episode of the show. I love this episode so much. I also love Nana's episode, but this episode I've watched so many times, and I love the music. Hence why it was my teaser for this video. Princess Emily is a European superstar who wished on a star to become a star. This will come back later, trust. Originally, Princess Emily was part of the band Maroon 5, with a question mark, with Princess Marina and Princess Jasmine. Now, only Princess Emily showed up to this interview with Vic because Princess Marina and Princess Jasmine got in a little bit of trouble with the law for pygmy monkey breeding for life. They charge very seriously for pygmy monkey breeding. Princess Emily does say that she misses her sisters in reference to them, but I think this is kind of just like a found family best friend type situation. I don't think they're actually related, just like how I don't think that they are actually royalty, because at one point Princess Emily does call the PA Little Prince. I don't know if it's a PA. Maroon 5 was discovered on YouTube, so we do know that YouTube exists. So Maroon 5 has a song called Whoopsies, We Shouldn't Have Done That, about the pygmy monkey situation where they did film on Zoom, Princess Jasmine and Princess Marina having their camera off. It is not known how well this song did, but I'm gonna assume not great. So Princess Emily on her solo journey is performing outside of Olivia Rodrigo venues. Now this is very interesting because Olivia Rodrigo has only had 2 main tours, the Sour Tour in 2022 and the Guts Tour in 2024. Now this show was filmed in 2023. So I think it leans more towards the sour side, but it could also be announcing upcoming things, so Guts. I think it might. Honestly, I originally said that I think it might be sour, but I think it might be Guts. Water is apparently salty in America, or at least here in Very Important People Land, or that's just kind of a Princess Emily thing. Scorfin is the #1 off-brand TikTok, and by saying that, we do know that TikTok exists, but it is spelled different, as we learned from the doll episode later on in the season. It's spelled with C's instead of K's. Princess Emily is now living in America to pursue her career. We do find out that Vic wants to name their first child Vic. Self-centered much? It's okay. I still love them. Vic takes a handful of ecstasy, reportedly. I did Google what happens when you take too much ecstasy, because I don't have the background experience to verify that. That is reportedly not what happens when you take ecstasy too much. So I don't know what Vic took but Princess Emily did say it was so many different drugs. Apparently, money where Princess Emily is from is 800 times as much as it is in America, which Vic does say, I don't think that is true anywhere. And from what I saw in my very quick Google search, that isn't true. But that doesn't mean that Princess Emily is lying. She's probably from a very small country that we don't know. But is uber rich. Princess Emily also has permanent face and neck gems. Now, I did not want to Google to see if this existed in real life, so I don't know, actually. But at least in the very important people world, you can get permanent face and neck gems. Princess Emily's meaning of life is to just be embracing it. And right after that, her song goes viral from a car chase on the 101, blasting out of the Toyota, who did horrible things that are not allowed to be said on camera. Vic says that it's I Am an American, but I think it's American number one superstar in all of our hearts. American number one superstar appears in Gamechanger and also in other episodes of Very Important People. Princess Emily also says, give me clap, which is an interesting turn of phrase that will come in our next person. Real quick, right before we move on to that next person, Vic mentions somebody named Paul. And Paul is on the crew of this show. I looked through the credits of Very Important People, and Paul Robolino is on it. And so I think this is in reference to him. I think it's fair to say that besides Bianca, the crew of the show is the same as written, and this also goes for Sam Reich being CEO of whatever is happening, and also Tamar being director, because that is also mentioned by name in a different episode, but it doesn't really tie too much into the lore. Moving on, I'm jumping to episode 6, Tommy Shriggly. I also love this episode. I am just a big Zach Oyama fan. Tommy Shriggly is a mental health advocate. He opens with, give me a little clap. This is odd phrasing, okay? Nobody uses this. So I use this. I meant it as Tommy Shriggly being a fan of Princess Emily, or just like subconsciously taking it from her, because we do find out that he actually torrents the show. So he has watched it. And that is really more than we can get from anybody else. They say that they've never heard of the show, but he's actually watched it. Granted, he's pirating it, but we'll take what we can get. So yes, I did connect him with Princess Emily because of this. She kind of exists in her own bubble. Okay, I had to add Olivia Rodrigo onto this board. Okay, because I had nobody else to put next to her besides Princess Marina and Princess Jasmine. Tommy Shriggly changed his life 10 years ago by thinking positively. Tommy Shriggly was in the military for 6 years. He was dishonorably discharged because one of the guys took the last can of Coke and said, well, we've got Coke Zero. And so he took out his entire platoon one by one in the dead of night. Now, I Googled how large is a platoon, and it said 20 to 50 soldiers. He was close to going to jail, but he got out of it because his uncle is a general. But somehow his life mission is to make people feel better. We do also find out that Vic is down in the dumps, but won't admit it. Tommy Shriggly has had 18 divorces and is looking for the 19th. His grandpa was the first self-help guru. He has a lot of family in the military. We know about his uncle. His dad was also in the military. His mom was a pilot, not military related. And Tommy Shriggly was in the Coast Guard. So that's when the whole platoon thing happened. But we do also find out that Vic is not allowed to throw things at PAs anymore. I don't know if this is a specifically Very Important People thing that they're not allowed to throw things at PAs, or if it's a general thing. It seems like it should be a general thing. Tommy Shriggly found $100,000 in the park in a bag and invested it, turning it into $16,000. He started a new brand of protein powder, which is just construction paper label on a Kirkland brand. So we do also know that Kirkland exists, which is Costco. But Vic is in their own way. Which, yeah, we kind of knew that. Mr. Shriggly can run a mile in 9 minutes, 2 miles in 35 minutes, and 3 miles in 16 minutes. For Tommy Shriggly, the meaning of life is money, power, people, journey, becoming who we're meant to be, all of it. Come on, everybody, give me a little clap. And for Vic, it's finding what the purpose of life means to you. Tommy Shriggly also mentions that there is another version of you that exists in the shadow dimension, which does seem like crazy talk until we get to the last person we're going to cover. So keep a pin in that for a while. Moving on to episode 2, Denzel. So Denzel is an alien from another planet. He's been here the last 20 years. He can bench 315. His skin sucks in the moon and the sun for food, but the moon is reflected from the sun, so yes, he just does collect food from the sun. So Denzel is actually staying in Vic's guest house, but Vic doesn't know, or now does know because of this interview. Important to note when talking about his disguises that Denzel wears out in public, which is just a variety of hats. He wears an Are You My Dad shirt from Dimension 20 Fantasy High. Now we do know that in this universe, Sam Reich is the CEO of the company that Very Important People is filmed at. So I think at the very least Dimension 20 does exist in this universe, and theoretically Vic is either a fan or, because it's on the same network, has merch lying around that Denzel can steal, or Denzel is a fan, because we do know that he steals DVDs from Redbox, but we also know that he watches porn. So we can assume that he has access to internet in some way, and the first season of Fantasy High is available for free on YouTube. If you didn't know, Fantasy High is great. I love it. Especially the first season. The first season is great. You don't even have to know D&D. This is a quick promo. Nobody's paying me for shit, okay? I don't get paid for this. I do this for fun. Oh, God, I do this for fun. Denzel is here to consensually repopulate the planet. Vic cries a lot and does a lot of pacing. Again, important thing to note about this Vic. Not real life Vic, but highly depressive and in an unhappy marriage. We'll get more to the unhappy marriage part soon. Denzel has no toes, just a suction cup tentacle. He made the app Clubhouse, which is credited as being made by Paul Davison and Rohan Seth. I then have a bullet point that just says rough. I don't remember what this means, but this app was created in 2020, which again, we do know he's been on this planet for the last 20 years. That makes sense. Denzel does stand-up comedy on his planet, but he is not good at it. 9-to-5s are common on their planet. A lot of things are quite similar on the planet that Denzel is from, which really is a very interesting thing. I mean, I guess like from a comedy perspective, it makes sense that he would make it so that the alien is just normal. I feel like we don't often see aliens living a life just like ours, which is fun. Denzel also says, why would he be afraid of roller coasters? Which implies that he is afraid of roller coasters. We do know that he's been hitching a ride on the underside of Vic's car. So either Vic went to a theme park at some point and he went on a roller coaster and didn't like it, saw a roller coaster and chickened out, or none of the above. He watched videos of people on YouTube going on roller coasters and went, no. To Denzel, the meaning of life is connections and legacy, and getting to stay in Vic's guest house. Vic does eventually give in, and they go to Redbox, and we find out in a later episode that Denzel is still staying in the guest house. Whether or not he pays rent or not is still up for consideration. Very Important People also has an extras episode, and I usually think if things are cut from the OG episode, it's for a reason and no longer part of the lore. However, with Denzel's, he has a kid in the extras, like living in a jar. And I do think this is canon, and I'll explain why I think it's canon a little bit later. I'm just mentioning it because I have it split by character. I do think this is canon. I do think Denzel has a son. We don't know who the mother is. Okie dokes. Moving on to episode 4. Marionette, Conqui, and Zonton de la doll. So these two are dolls come to life. A storm with lightning struck their home at midnight, and they made a wish just a couple of weeks ago, and they were turned into living dolls, human-sized, to find their creator, her. Princess Emily wished on a star, and I think this is a similar magic. Oh, that's what I forgot. Princess Emily wished on a star, and I do think that is just enough lore for me to connect them, because again, their wishes did come true. Princess Emily's just didn't necessarily have a supernatural element to it. The dolls need help to remember, so take everything they say with a grain of salt. They are from the south of France, spent most of their lives together on a shelf as dolls. They say that they were made in 1440 and also 14 to 40 years old, and also 450 to 500 crumbs as they would measure it. In no world is this true. On the costuming side, their costumes are Elizabethan inspired, which I googled, and is 1558 to 1603. So like 1440 isn't that far off. The costumes could be from 1440 or like inspired by 1440. but I do think they are not actually from that, considering Vic does show them a photo that was taken in 1986 of them with their creator, Sarah, who we find out died in 1987. It is now 2023-ish. But we do know that Sarah created them, so realistically, they existed not too long before the 80s. Because I don't know when Sarah made them. She does look relatively older in the photo, but she has pink hair, so that kind of throws off my thing. I did math. I didn't show my work, but I said that likely it's 10 crumbs per year and that she's around 40, which also would make the dolls 40 to 50 years old. Which honestly doesn't sound that bad. The dolls got to Los Angeles through a series of modes of transportation and geographic features. The small clock on set is apparently an heirloom of Vic's. Interesting to note. I don't know who it belongs to or what the deal with the clock is, but it is an heirloom. Zonton plays many instruments. Marionette only plays the one. MSNBC doesn't want Vic, but Vic is still hoping that they might. Hence why they won't let Zonton kill MSNBC. The dolls did go trending with hashtag homeward bound, but with homeward bound, but with dolls this time. Social media icons, the two of them. This is clearly Instagram, which is very interesting because I feel like super long hashtags like this don't really catch on Instagram, but who am I to judge? Zonton does poetry. Marionette does scary latte art. Both talents seem to be about gun violence or just violence from weapons, because I don't know why I thought that Marionette's latte art was a gun, but it is in fact a knife. Marionette's latte art apparently looks like Vic's dad, so I don't know if that's a premonition, because Marionette was kind of weird about it when Vic said, hey, that looks like my dad. So maybe Vic's dad does die from knife violence. The dolls can't actually speak French, which again just kind of goes to show that they're definitely not from 1440. It's just what they were made as. It's kind of like a Toy Story situation. The meaning of life to the dolls is to find her and be reunited. This is where we see that TikTok in this universe is spelled with 2 C's for some reason, and is the only way to find someone we're looking for, which is relatively true. People on TikTok are nuts about finding people. Zonton used to make out with Sarah, but kind of consensual in a way. Moving on to episode 5, Kep with the silent L and Dr. Milk. This is a man and his puppet. Kep at one point says one of my dads, which does imply that he has 2. Now he can have multiple dads in a couple different situations. He could have a mom that dated multiple men, not necessarily in a scandalous way either, because we do know that one of his dads is dead. She could have just remarried. I, however, like to take the gay option whenever possible, so I put 2 dads. Dr. Milk does at one point do a monologue about his mom leaving in a Camaro, which I feel just goes to show that they're gay dads anyway. Because if the mom left and he still says dads, are you the stepdad or the dad who stepped up? You know what I mean? Dr. Milk is an actor. Again, he is a puppet. But he's a very advanced puppet. We'll get there. Kep was a loner in high school, and so he literally made himself a friend. Except Mr. Milk was made as a crutch, but he says that he's kind of always existed. Vic agrees that he's been here many times before, and Dr. Milk says that Vic has too. This is very important for Vic as kind of a being, and also for figuring out what Dr. Milk's deal is. Kep started doing shows with Dr. Milk, but eventually Dr. Milk took over and made Kep the butt of the joke when he spontaneously did a monologue, and that's what skyrocketed them, because before Dr. Milk it was kind of lame. But Kep was happy. Dr. Milk does a lot of professional performances, and we do know that he can't exist without Kep, but Kep is consistently blurred out or covered in all of these performances, including the ad for Tiddly, which we know that Vic is on, and Tiddly is a philanthropic social app. I don't know if I'm saying those words correctly, and quite frankly, I've tried so many times and I can't get them out. Dr. Milk was nominated for a BAFTA in a part written for him. This doesn't necessarily mean that he is a British citizen, because non-British citizens have been nominated for the award, as well as a puppet can be nominated for an award, because my guy Kermit was nominated for an Oscar. Dr. Milk being nominated for a BAFTA is not that far out of the ordinary. He still could be an American puppet. However, Dr. Milk does not think that he is a puppet. Kep made a gun out of wood that can't be detected at bus stations, which does make me think he's doing some suspicious activities. Quite frankly, it's not enough to convict him. It's just enough to be like, This is the episode where we find out that Vic's stepdaughter is a PA on set. Dr. Milk is working on a one-man show called Not More Than a Puppet, Definitely Not a Human. And, I don't really understand that title. Because if it's, double negatives, then it's more than a puppet, a human. He's not, though. I don't know. I feel like he is more than a puppet, but he's not quite a human. People don't like my opinions on puppets.
Do people not know that Rex from Victorious is a puppet? No, people know. You look at it, he looks like a puppet. But the thing is, in the Nickelodeon Cinematic Universe lore, he's not a puppet.
Dr. Milk and Kep share a bank account because apparently puppets can't get their own account, but Dr. Milk does still end up having more money than Kep. The meaning of life to Dr. Milk is thinking about Vic. It's not quite clear if that's exactly what he meant as answer to that question, because he kind of just mumbles it and then asks what Vic thinks. And Vic says it's finding people to live a shared experience with. Every time Vic is asked, they do change it, but I think there can be multiple meanings of life to one person. Dr. Milk is apparently in 6 shows at the same time on the West End, and the ones that are live are broadcasted. There's a whole system in place that I didn't write down because it doesn't matter to the lore. Kep is going back to a warehouse with food trucks, which again seems hard to do if Dr. Milk is in 6 shows on the West End. I believe this is the first ad that we see for Chomsky's potato chips. If there's an ad, it's always for Chomsky's. There is some significance with Chomsky's. I don't quite know what it is. Here's what I think Dr. Milk is. I think it's sort of a power siphon situation. And when we get to Avery Goodman, we do know that there is technology that has the power to steal energy from you into itself. I think Dr. Milk is more than a puppet. And as Vic said, it always existed. The puppet is just a vessel for him. I feel like that vessel has to be operated by Kep because Kep made it. I think that if Dr. Milk could exist without Kep, he would. Episode 7. So Avery Goodman is a professor of transhumanism. He has ultra homeostasis system installed on his body so that he has no need to eat, sleep, or defecate. He is in charge of electrical and mechanical procedure. He's worked on ways of siphoning energy. He is only recently involved in local government after the mayor had a tragic accident. It is implied that Avery Goodman is responsible for that. Avery Goodman says that under him, public transportation issues, sanitation issues, and the arts would not exist. And it's not out of malice, it's just him being absolutely correct. He tried to donate his inventions to the Smithsonian, but they said no thank you, so they are on very important people. He has an invention to see far that plugs directly into brainwaves, censors unnecessary things. Vic falls into a trance saying they don't need their eyes. Avery tries to stay away from his own machinery. He knows the power of it, he knows what it can do. He knows that he will lose all sense of control if he plugs into his machine. There's also an alarm clock that adds a circadian rhythm into you. Vic doesn't remember this, thinks they took a power nap. There's a pager that only tells you the important messages directly from Avery. Immediately, you do what he tells you to do. This is a form of mind control. Photosynthesis is not going to be necessary after he fixed things. The ultimate power is control. Vic doesn't like not having control, but happens quite often.
To him, the meaning of life is right now there is none, but there will be soon. Ask again in a couple months. He's holding a festival that is mandatory March 7th with a bouncy castle. In this episode, we also find out that Tamar is the director of the show and that Vic doesn't actually have that much sway in what goes on in this universe's very important people. Moving on to episode 8, Jasper and Casper. Their full names are Jasper and Casper Sheffield Wednesday the 5th. They have been married for 2 days. They are both authors. They were parent-trapped by their children, which is actually quite common in the UK. After their honeymoon, they wrote an ebook full of pornographic videos called Sex the British Way, which is essentially not sex. Very important people provided a one-way boat trip. The kids fell overboard and Casper and Jasper left them there. Casper and Jasper think they look entirely different from each other, but they are literally wearing the same outfit, have the same haircut, and the same moles. They are both colorblind though, so they don't know. This is the episode where we find out that Vic's stepdaughter's name is Bianca. We find out that Jasper would kill Vic for Casper. They can't even name one of their children. To them, the meaning of life is to feel everything and nothing. Step 1 is apparently throwing kids, even if they are your stepkids. in the ocean. Vic agrees with this statement as a Chomsky's ad as Vasper, the third member of this couple, a throuple, if you will. This does imply that Vic has had an affair, which will not be the last one that is implied that Vic has on this show. Episode 9 is Leighanna Jean Gruthers, who is a former beauty queen from Hawkesville, Texas. She moved recently to 50 minutes outside of Orlando. Apparently the tissue material of the tissues is too rough for her, so either she has very sensitive skin or we are buying the cheap tissues, which I believe we are considering the budget is low as far as we know. Leighanna plays one of Ariel's sisters in a knockoff Disney restaurant. She started doing pageants just outside of 4, but looks no younger than 16 in the photo that is shown of her in the 4-year-old pageant. Leighanna is disqualified from all pageants in Lower Texas for vehicular manslaughter, and this does spur some of my favorite lines from the show. I thought your name was vehicular. Leighanna's grandpa is worried about her and concerned she is going to kill again. Apparently this is a tendency and something to be worried about. Leighanna calls Vic British. This could just be a throwaway line, but I think it does show that there is some element of Casper and Jasper and essentially Vasper in Vic still. Leighanna is in love with Dylan, but you can't be a boyfriend if you're in jail, so they are no longer dating. The meaning of life to Leighanna is to be alive. The day she turned 18, she immaculately conceived. I'm choosing to believe that she immaculately conceived because thinking about that makes me sad. Leighanna says that she would not be opposed to a sugar daddy situation with Vic, and Vic doesn't straight up say no. It's more of like an I don't have the money type situation. So I did add a possible affair marking between the two, because I don't think we can necessarily rule it out. Because Vic didn't just straight up say, I'm not into you like that. Vic said, I don't have money. Leighanna does admit that she did kill those people, and it is a family. We don't know how many people. I'm like at least 3 people that she killed. But like, if we're thinking like nuclear family style, 4. If we're thinking Dougherty dozen, 12.
Vic says that they've never hung out with somebody, which is very interesting considering that Vic has a husband that they have been married with 4 years. Again, if it is enough to cheat repeatedly on him, I think there's some further issues in that marriage. But yeah, not having anybody to hang out with when you have a husband, like, isn't that you're supposed to be your built-in friend? We do also find out in this episode that Vic was born in New Jersey, which could be a lie, and that Vic's biggest achievement is the New York Times crossword in 37 minutes, and they only cheated 3 times. Moving on to episode 16, Pig number 2. Pointing out the obvious here, it's a pig in a world of humans, but dogs are normal, unless there's a specific type of dog that can step on moms, but we do know it was a dachshund that stepped on pig number 2's mom. So pig number 2 is one of the 3 little pigs, the only guy in the 3 little pigs. The other 2 are sisters. Pig number 2 took an Uber walk to get here, which is like Uber, but it's just somebody to walk with you, which honestly, like, is originally a joke, but like, it's kind of fire, actually. It's the story of the 3 little pigs. The straw and stick house are destroyed. Pig number 2 describes it as an enormous wolf trying to eat them and stepped on Mom's face, but Mom didn't die then tripped again, and the wolf stepped on her and killed her. That's when the mom died, is the second time being stepped on. They used to Airbnb the 3rd brick house. Pig number 2 thinks that the government is lying about vaccines. Pig number 2 has put together a militia. Some people call it that, but it's not a militia. But like, for my sake, I labeled it as a militia. In the militia, there is the gingerbread man, the brave little toaster, the 7 dwarves, Cinderella, and Billie Eilish. I think I forgot to put the brave little toaster on there. Pig number 2's dad sells house insurance and builds their housing. He collected the money from the houses being blown down and left the family. So they lost their mom, their dad left, and it's just the 3 pigs now. Pig number 2 is doomsday prepping, which is worrying his sisters. He came out with a line of high-protein canned soup. When Pig 1 and 3 heard that Pig 2 was coming on this news program, VIP, they sent Vic 2's diary to read. The big bad wolf, we do find out, is a miniature show-quality dachshund named Cinnamon, owned by a Subaru Outback owner, possibly a lesbian. I did think that I remembered somebody else in the VIP universe having a Subaru, but I watched it 2 times after I wrote that note, and I didn't find it, so I think I made that up. Another interesting thing is that Pig number 2 says that he doesn't do tissues, and just like knowing that Leighanna came before and she thought the tissues were too rough and didn't take one, I don't know. Is there something going on with the tissues? Here's the issue. 2 people mentioned tissues, and I'm like, is there something with the tissues? I don't know. Is there something with the tissues? There could be. Did anybody in season 2 mention the tissues? I've tried to stay away from it. Anyway, jump in the comments. Pig 2 has a friend, Gary, who writes flat earther text that Joe Biden is hiding the truth. Pig number 2 loves Josh Groban and Michael Bublé all year. And the meaning of life to pig number 2 is revenge. Find out that Vic is not an actor, but a journalist and not a comedian either. Pig number 2 eventually adopts Garbage Dog that reportedly likes Vic, but we do not see Garbage Dog liking Vic. But it is later revealed that Vic hates dogs. Episode 11, Martha Tops and Lucian Azathoth. They are satanic youth group leaders for the Church of the Dark One, located in Libertyville, Illinois. This church is also known as Conqui of the Falling Star, the Ring of Unholy, Anti-Light, Church of the Big Scary Demon Guy. Vic is from, reportedly, just outside of St. Charles, Illinois, but Vic said that they were from New Jersey earlier, so maybe they moved around a lot, or Vic is lying. They are famous in the youth group for their hymns. Most people only talk about American Number One Superstar, but these songs are fire. I don't remember them, and that's why, because American Superstar is super catchy. But these songs were really good. They were banned from ever returning to Sweden because of their music shoot there. They have a yearly fundraiser, Bountiful Deception, to take children as close to the equator as possible to replicate the fiery passions of the underworld. Paula Deen will be talking to the children. We find out that the producers of the show are worried about ratings. The meaning of life to them is to make a connection with every soul that they possibly can. Just because you hover over an abyss doesn't mean you can't have an attitude of gratitude. Amen. VIP has people who write in who are 12 to 13 from New York. So apparently that's the target audience, or they're making these up, which is also likely if they're worried about ratings. Martha explains how to deal with a bully through a spell. Vic answers instantly that chickens are the most evil bird you can find, but I think most people would argue that it's geese. That's not really that important for lore, but I think it's important to point out. Vic asks if it works for all bullies because their stepdaughter is so mean because they are the same age. Important lore info, they're the same age. The administrator for the school attached to the church is Mr. Lackamore. There may be a sacrifice, and they are using pyrotechnics in what it looks like is the school gym, which does not seem safe, but again, if they're doing sacrifices, they clearly don't care about that. Vic is ready to exchange Bianca's soul, but keeps her for now. Vic feels a wing growing out of their back, and the leaders say that their life will continue to crumble until they mend the bonds with their stepdaughter. So they actually have spells. They turn the camera guy's ears blue, so they do have magic, and they do curse Vic. Moving on to our final episode. Episode 12, Augbert. Let's dive in. This is crazy. This is a crazy episode for lore. So first off, this episode grosses me out. I did watch it multiple times for this video, but it does gross me out because I just think about being in that sweaty suit and the amount of gross things that Brennan does in this episode. I love him, but the amount of gross things in this episode freak me out. Augbert is from the woods. He needs to get back to the cottage he fell asleep in the glade. Vic was told there's going to be an eccentric physicist. Augbert tells Vic that they're dead, or as good as dead. Augbert is a last name because it's the last name that Augbert will ever have because he's dead. Augbert thinks Vic's name is Nance. I wrote in here that I don't remember this part, and I really don't. I don't remember this part. I've watched it 2 more times since I wrote this, and I forgot that Augbert calls Vic Nance. I don't know what Nance means in the context of very important people. Augbert talks about when the shadows came. Again, this is very interesting because Tommy Shriggly talks about the shadow dimension. And that's the fun thing about this show is I don't think in season 1 they really were plying people to casually mention things to add to the lore. I know they did focus a little bit more on lore in season 2, but so many things as they say come up again, and it's it's improv. This is so crazy. The cities aren't safe anymore because again the shadows came. Shadows surrounded him when Augbert fell asleep and he woke up in the studio. His pappy took him to the woods when he was a little boy. His mother wandered off and said, "If you ever speak to me again, I'll kill you," and jumped in the water and maybe drowned. We don't know. Augbert is from Newfoundland in Canada. Real life Vic is Canadian, so it wouldn't be out of the realm for host Vic to also be Canadian. And again, based on what we learn later in this episode, could be Canadian. Vic has a niece that does something similar to handing them rocks out of a suitcase, which is what Augbert does. And I do think this is, again, interesting based on what we learn later. Do I want to do a reveal? Augbert is Vic. That's kind of the whole thing. Augbert says that he invented physics. We can safely rule out that this is not true. Vic says that they know Augbert from their nightmare where they are trapped in a box that's thrown in the ocean and can either plug the hole and suffocate or can pull it out and drown. Casper and Jasper, if you will. And I'm just coming up with this now on the spot, but considering the curse, is this a recent nightmare that Vic has had? Because if it happened after the curse, it could be that the curse is trying to get Vic to solve it because Casper and Jasper said to throw her stepdaughter in the ocean. Yeah. Augbert says that he's been trying to warn Vic for thousands of years. Vic likely willed Augbert to this dimension. Vic fired so many people and you can get into a lot of trouble for firing people without cause. The fact that this is apparently live television that Vic is mentioning this on, although this episode I think is kind of a dream, it exists in a weird limbo. Augbert says that if you don't save us, we don't survive. Vic has to save the whole world. This is interesting because Augbert does say that it's the whole world, but also we do eventually, again, know that Augbert is Vic in a way. So, like, us could also just mean Vic. We do also find out that Augbert is kind of on a bad trip, eating bad fermented berries that allow him to get into the dream realm. But apparently it works because Vic does say that they see Augbert in their dreams. Apparently the shadows can see through anything with eyes. I don't know if that's really important this season, but I do think that's an important thing to look out for in season 2. In this episode, Vic says that they have 4 people living with them. If they're counting Vic, then I think we can safely say that Denzel doesn't have a son. However, if you say you have 4 people living with you, I think that usually implies that it's not you. So I do think this means that Denzel does have his son in canon because we know that Vic has a husband. We know that Vic has a stepdaughter. Unless Nana moved in, which I doubt, they don't have that great of a relationship, or somebody else moved in, but we haven't heard mention of it, I think the most likely thing is Denzel and his son in the guest house. Augbert says that Vic is going to die at 95 and step out of the front door and there won't be a cloud in the sky. He does say that 95 could also be tomorrow. Again, time in the show is whack. Time in the show is whack, and this episode kind of shows that. I think it's meant to more just be that Augbert is a little nuts. They do an ad for Chomsky's where Augbert downs the bag, but in all the ads prior, Vic takes like a bite, and like we don't actually see Vic swallow the chip. So I think the fact that Augbert is eating the chip is something. I don't quite know what that means exactly, but I did tell you that Chomsky's means something. I don't know what it means, but it does mean something. The original physicist that was supposed to be on the episode is Dr. Gloria Steynord, who is somewhere in the building, who is a shadow monster and ate Augbert's dad in one bite. Augbert says that he wrote, "Oh, Mickey, you're so fine." It seems like Vic was being buttered up to be eaten. I don't know what the context of that is. Here's the thing. I don't put context with my notes, and I wrote these like a year ago. Augbert has a twin brother named Bogbert and was sent by Dad living in Miami who actually got in a plane, and that was the whole eating thing. Dad just got in a plane and left. Vlog footage is explained from Twin, who is actually named Katie, and that Augbert is Vic, and Vic hasn't reached out after their dad flew to Miami without any explanation, and that Katie is a lifestyle vlogger. I do think some of the things that Augbert says is just crazy because it's Dreamland, he's on berries. But there are certain things that we can take with Vic. Augbert says you're going to wake up soon. It is implied that this is a dream. However, when Vic wakes up, it's the pile of rocks. So, like, it is implied that something happened. But also, very important people is supposed to be live TV in this universe. So, like, I don't really understand what aired. Or did Vic just fall asleep? Like, I don't know. And then it all goes back to an ad for Chomsky's. Again, Chomsky's means something, but I have no idea what it is. I'm dumb. I'm not dumb. Don't call yourself dumb. Augbert says the meaning of life is you put rocks in the bag, you carry it as long as you can, and you find somewhere you love and put the rocks down. This really goes with Vic in this universe. They do not like their husband. They don't seem to like this job. This seems like a call out. It seems like a cry for help from like a internal consciousness type thing, or magic. We know it exists. The rocks are important. I said I'm not going to talk about season 2, but the first episode, starting with a character who's made of rocks, Sam Reich is here, saying that he is one of the producers and CEO, which again fits in with the normal thing. Again, I think a lot of the crew and the higher ups of Dropout exist in this universe as the same way that they usually do. There's nothing really to affect them. Vic's agent needs a check for $20,000, and that is not a metaphor. I don't remember the context of that. Vic passes out and Augbert takes over the show, talking about how to escape the show. Again, Vic doesn't really like the show. I think this is a sign that Vic feels trapped by very important people eventually. I think next season it's more of a trap. This season it's more of just doing it because they kind of have to. The alarm clock that Vic wakes up to is very similar to Avery Goodman's without all the doohickeys, probably because it's the same. And they took the things off. And American Superstar plays. There's a pile of rocks in front of Vic. I've talked about the pile of rocks. I think American Superstar playing is very interesting because in our world, it is what blew up this show and eventually got it its award that it got in real life, but then also got in the show, which does trap Vic. I don't think they knew this when they aired it, but the fact that this song is playing, I think, does later show Vic's entrapment in everything. And that brings us to the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. If I missed anything that you know, or if you have any comments about season 2 happening, drop that in the comment section. Like and subscribe. I'm hoping to do season 2 if you guys want me to, or even if you don't. If you are interested in that, subscribe, turn those notifications on. I am going to try and post more than like once a year. These videos do take a lot out of me, and again, I am a college student. I'm about to go into my junior year. So, love y'all. Toodles.